Welcome to the 2024 Utah Legislative Update from UCOLA, which is the Utah Code Officials Legislative Affairs Committee. We're here to try and enlighten you and help you understand some of the changes in the laws that have taken place this past year.
My name is Eric Miller. I'm with Farmington City.
I'm Catherine Nelson. I'm from Harriman City.
I'm Rob Durfee from Sandy City.
I'm Thomas Peterson from the Division of Facilities Construction and Management.
Jerry Thompson, I'm from West Valley City, and I'm the chair of UCOLA. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video.
Hi, I'm Rob Durfee with Sandy City.
And I'm Thomas Peterson with the Division of Facilities Construction and Management.
Today we're going to talk about the state amendments. Specifically, we'll start with House Bill 64, which is a bill that we put out to correct some mistakes from the previous year's bill and some items that need to be corrected immediately.
Thanks, Rob. Let's dive into this. First of all, this bill is already in effect. It went into effect February 16th upon signature of the governor. And it does quite a few things. The first thing it does, which will primarily affect only state agencies, but I think everybody needs to be aware of, is it addresses the issue of high school students being educated at technical colleges. This allows a technical university to bring in high school age students and still call the facility a B occupancy and not have to go to an E occupancy. Next, we stayed on the 2017, or we moved from the 2017 ICC A117.1 ADA standard, and we reverted back to the 2009 standard. In our conversations with ICC there and Kim Parlberg with ICC, there was no reason from an ADAG standpoint, from a litigation standpoint, that we had to go to the 2017 version. And what this will allow us to do is to have more flexibility. An architect or a designer can still use the 2017 standard if they would like to, but it still keeps our minimum standard on the minimum ADAG standard. So that was the intent of this proposal. Anything you want to add on that, Rob?
No, I think this is a great move to stay with the 2009. It keeps the turnarounds, especially in the restrooms, which seem to be the bigger issue going forward. I think this corrects and helps us stay where we were. And the 17 brings some things that could be helpful going forward also.
Yeah. Rob made a great point. It goes from the new standard took it to a 67-inch turning radius. This takes us back to the standard 60-inch radius, as well as some ramp issues that would have been prohibitive for construction. So, all right, moving on. The next issue we address is the required inspections. A few years ago, we had some legislation that dictated what inspections could be done by a jurisdiction, and there was a lot of confusion involved with how that looked. So in this instance, we clarified what inspections above and beyond what was already there could be done. So in this, we did add insulation, which was a real topic amongst a lot of folks. So insulation inspections can now be done. Weather-resistant exterior wall envelope inspections can now be done, as well as fire-resistant rated construction inspections. And Robbie, you want to talk a little bit about the fire-resistant rated?
Yeah, so the fire-resistant rated construction, what we're talking about here is the walls in townhomes, the rated assemblies, the 1 hour, 2 hour rated assemblies. And then what this does is it gives you the ability to inspect these items. What it doesn't give you the ability to inspect is such as a garage roof that's type X. So this is just solely listed for the townhomes 1 hour constructions.
The other thing I want to point out is this is an IRC change, so it would not apply to commercial construction. So just be aware of that. But yeah, as Rob mentioned, townhome walls, 1 hour, 2 hour walls, we're still going to be able to look at those. But normal single family dwellings with habitable space above the garage, it's required to be type X. That's not going to be covered in this provision. So still are not technically allowed to inspect those. Moving on, we added a prescriptive value for spray applied air impermeable insulation. This allows you to use this prescriptively without going through the testing requirements. I will add that as we go through this, we We did have to make a technical change that this is not allowed to be used prescriptively unless you have less than 2 air changes per hour in the home. So just be aware of that. That is not in this bill, but it does come in 518. We made that clarification in 518. So if you're going to apply this air impermeable insulation as a prescriptive note, just be aware that the home has to be less than 2 air changes per hour. Moving forward, this is kind of the driving with this bill. This was the issue we were trying to tackle for why we made this bill effective so quickly. I don't know if you want to speak to this one, Rob.
Yeah, so when we had the change in the panels that came to the houses, the main problem with why this bill came about is the panels that the code is calling out specifically for the services are not being produced by the manufacturer. So we couldn't meet the intent of the current code without making this change. So this is a good change to bring us back to where we were, but a chance to go back to where it needs to be in the future when the panels become available.
Yeah, as Rob mentioned, we just can't get the equipment right now, so we reverted back to the old code for now. This does have a sunset date, just so everybody is aware of that. Starting July 1st, 2027, this language will disappear in our state amendments. So that's kind of something we had to do to make sure everybody felt comfortable with putting this in the code.
It's a good bridge gap to move us forward for the next few years.
Exactly. The next one deals with crawl space lighting and outlets. We deleted this specifically. We have 3 or 4 here that we're going to talk about. The first one is we deleted the need for crawl space lighting to be GFCI protected, as well as electrical equipment requiring servicing. We deleted that, and outdoor outlets. I've had a lot of people talk to me about why are we deleting GFCI protection for outdoor outlets, and the reason for this is GFCI protection is already required on receptacles. What this would do is it would require your outdoor lighting to be GFCI protected, and
just keep in mind the difference between a receptacle and an outlet. Sometimes that gets a little bit mixed up in our industry. I know when we had this bill up, there was a lot of confusion about that. So just keep in mind the difference between the receptacle and the outlet. Yeah. That'll help you moving forward, I think.
Yeah, it created a lot of confusion. So I think knowing the difference between a receptacle and outlet is important. The other thing it did, and many of you are aware that we had a first printing of the IRC and a second printing of the IRC, and it created some discrepancies on where sections lined up with NFPA getting ICC the information for the code. So
yeah, this created a little bit of havoc last year in that the first printing version didn't match the second printing version that was used to make the bill. And so there was no intent to change these things. It was just that unfortunately the numbers were off, and that's created some problems, though I think most people understood and followed that throughout last year. But this does correct that going forward.
Yeah, those last 3 items on this slide are not new changes. They're just renumbered.
Correct.
Yeah. All right, moving on. This is the exact same change that we already talked about. Just addresses the number of disconnects that have to be on a multifamily housing building. So with this issue, we've already talked about it. It has a sunset date. And just really what it does is just says, hey, for now, we can install the old equipment that didn't have a main disconnect on multifamily housing. We can have the disconnects per each unit until the equipment is available. So in this bill, we also incorporated some of the changes from the Fire Prevention Board. This is one of those changes that essentially matches the definition of the word approved to match what's in the International Building Code and the other codes. That change was made last year in the other documents, and we just are trying to have uniformity across codes. So
yeah, this is a good move, just so it's the same in all the code books. I mean, this reads the same in all of them now.
Same one with this one. well, I guess this isn't the same one. This came from the Fire Prevention Board. This is an independent third party. Pretty self-explanatory. It's just a new definition for independent third party for fire code. So
This follows the standard they've been following for a few years. This just puts it into code so that the standard's universal, because this is what they've been doing for years.
Yep. And that kind of addresses HB 64. If anybody's interested in diving into any of these codes, they're available on le.utah.gov's website. If you go to bills under the 2024 session, and then just click on, for that last one, it was HB 64, and now we're going to dive into HB 518. This is more of the controversial aspects of building code changes for this year. We had two bills, one that we tried to keep non-controversial so we could make sure it went through the legislative process quickly and was signed by the governor without any issue. This one is the other issues that we looked at, as well as the recommendation from the Uniform Building Codes Commission. So, and this one does not go into effect until July 1st of this year. So anything you want to add?
And this is our annual state amendment bill that we have. This is the first one, like you said, that was the one that we needed to put in place. And this would be your annual one that we have every year with the changes. I think it definitely had some work through on this one. It had a lot of changes.
Yeah, and I will say before we get started in this, the energy code provisions that were implemented, I would encourage you to look up. I know Brent Ursenbach is working hard to develop a class to address all the changes that were made in this. So I don't think we ought to spend a lot of time diving into the energy code provisions of the changes, Chapter 11 specifically in the IRC. But I know Brent is working on putting together a class to address those specifically. So as you'll see in the slides, we had some humor with what was done there. But the intent of the energy code provisions that we have was to get us on the 2021 energy provisions. But with all the amendments, our goal was to stay, I don't know if it's our goal, the goal of those parties involved was to stay at least where we're at currently. The original provision took us back a little bit, and so we made some modifications on some R values and some other things based on some comments from a few individuals to at least keep us where we were, or where we are now. So as when we go into July 1st and we adopt this new code, the energy code provisions should keep us where we are now. So let's dive into it. So the first thing that this bill does is it makes some clarifications on existing legal non-conforming terms and says that if a building has been there so long that it has a vested right to exist as it is. All right, heading forward in this, the next amendment we have is it's in regards to what a political subdivision can and can't do as far as when they're issuing permits. It says that a compliance agency for political subdivision may not reject a permit or withhold approval for a project whenever approval is required for failure to comply with the applicable provisions of the title, unless the compliance agency, and what you have to do is you have to cite the specific reference, and you have to describe how the project doesn't meet that. This also would be in conjunction with other provisions that say you still have to issue the permit if there's not substantive issues within the 14 days. Just want to make sure that is addressed as well. The other thing this amendment does is a municipality may not withhold a permit or project approval because of a compliance structure that has been on the property for longer than 5 years, does not pose a health, life, safety, or safety concern, and is unrelated to the project that is being applied for. So if you have a legal non-conforming building or aspect of a building that it was done more than 5 years ago, what it really does is it creates a timeline where if the building's been occupied for 5 years, we really can't go in and say, you didn't get a permit for this. We're not going to let you pull a permit for this other thing because you didn't get this permit. You can't hold those two issues against one another. So unless it involves that aspect of it, then you can bring those things up to compliance. And the last thing it does is it says that a municipality may require additional permitting, engineering, or inspections for a completed non-compliant structure if it's completed for 10 years or less, it poses a health or life safety concern, and then a compliance agency or a representative of a compliance agency issues a certificate of occupancy. They can't withdraw that certificate of occupancy.
What this will do is this will help us with some of these older structures that we have that aren't really part of the scope of work, that we can move forward without them being an issue. And if they are scope of the work, we can address the life safety concerns. So I think this is a good bill going forward that's going to help us clarify some stuff, and I actually think it'll make things a little bit easier for our industry. So
yeah, thanks, Rob. Moving on, as I mentioned before, I didn't have a better slide for this one, so I think we all need to say a prayer and try to figure out where we're at with the 2021 Energy Code.
Yeah, I sat on this committee for the last 2.5 years, and this is a great picture because there is a lot that's happened, and a lot of smart people put in a lot of work. But this is a great starting point of where we're at, because we may need it.
Yeah, and like I said, look soon for a training from Brent Ursenbach to kind of give us some guidance on how we take in all these changes that were made with the Energy Code. So this was a requirement that came from the health department, and it deals with blended memory care facilities. Not too many people will have an opportunity to deal with this, but if you do have a blended memory care facility where you have people living together, where one of them requires memory care and the other one does not, this is some code that helps address how we handle the egress of those rooms, areas, or spaces. So we did add a few things as far as projects that are exempt from building permits. And in this, we clarified the definition of a retaining wall that needs a permit, and there was a lot of discrepancies. This was being looked at many different ways, but what we came up with is if a retaining wall has less than 4 feet or more than 4 feet of unbalanced backfill, it requires a permit unless it's supporting a surcharge. So if you have a footing next to a retaining wall, and the cone of influence of the bottom corner of that footing is impacting that above the unbalanced backfill, then that retaining wall would require a permit. But if that retaining wall is less than 4 feet from the grade level on this side to the grade level on this side, then a permit is not required, regardless of how tall the wall is. So that's kind of a clarification.
I think this is going to help a little bit too, because I think it's been measured different ways how people interpret the code. Some have measured from the bottom of the footing, others have measured from the top. So I think this clarifies a little bit of that, and I think it'll help move forward.
Well, and also I think the code, from my perspective on this issue, the code said you measure it from the bottom of the footing to the top of the wall, but you may only have 4 inches or 10 inches of dirt that is unbalanced.
Yes.
So I don't, that's one thing I struggled with this code for 15, 20 years now is, why do I have to have a permit for a wall that's only supporting a foot of dirt? Because maybe I had to go to get to native soil to put my footing on, but really it's only supporting.
And this is really good bill for that portion. This is a common sense language I think we put in that should help us moving forward. I like it.
Yeah, so that's the intent of that one. The other one we did on this one, the decks not greater than 30 inches. I believe that was already there in our state amendment, so I'm not going to hit that one. But the last one we had was brought to us from some county commissioners and some building departments, which deals with Connex boxes, the large shipping containers. They have seen a lot of those that are being installed. Typically, they don't put them on a footing and foundation, so they don't meet the definition. They exceed the allowable, 200 square feet. They don't require a permit. So footing and foundation has always been a question. Do I need a footing and foundation? Do I not? So what this does is it exempts it from the permit up to 350 square feet. It has to be detached from anything else. You can't weld a bunch of these together or put one on top of the other and still be exempt from permit. And once you start to modify them in that way, they are going to be required to have permit and all that kind of, all those requirements that need to come with that. And they only apply in a residential setting and for storage only. So anything you want to add on that, Rob?
Yeah, just a couple of things. I mean, it would require permit if they chose to add power or something to that extent to it. But we want to also clarify with this that this does not precede zoning amendments. So if these aren't allowed in your current zoning, doesn't mean that they're allowed today. This is essentially where they would be allowed. And that's, we just want to clarify that so people don't just think automatically they can have the storage containers everywhere. So.
Yeah, they should apply the same as a shed. A shed under 200 square feet is exempt from permit, but it's not exempt from planning and zoning requirements. Correct. So fall under the same provision there. In section 310, this was a new change that I don't do a lot of IRC structures anymore, but this is one that was brought to us as a concern. With our emergency escape and rescue openings, they are required in the new code to go all the way to the public way. And what we found is in townhomes, we had a large group of townhomes and they did fenced backyards. That would require either an alleyway in the back of the property, which oftentimes becomes a nuisance, a safety concern for other aspects. And so as we talked about this, we decided to say that no, you don't have to go to a public way with a path from your emergency escape and rescue openings. All you have to do is get to a public yard or court. So that's kind of what that one did.
Yeah, I didn't even know this was part of the new code until it got brought before the UBCC this year. So I think it's a good change, and it's a common sense change. It doesn't. I'm glad to see it in. It doesn't make a lot of sense for it to be there.
Yeah, I can tell you a lot of people weren't calling it. In fact, when I heard about it, I'm like, wait a sec, what is this? And
I honestly didn't even know it applied. And I do residential plan review.
Yeah, a lot of people were in that same boat. So we thought this was a good exception. Once again, we have a lot of amendments to the energy provisions. But that being said, the provisions that we're enforcing now should carry through. But I would encourage, like I said, to get with we do have some future education opportunities coming. Pay attention to those. The one issue that was surprising to me is in the IRC, we currently don't allow air. And I received some comments from some folks saying that we have jurisdictions that aren't allowing air to be used in drainways vent piping in winter months. So we took the provisions from the International Plumbing Code and just moved them over to the International Residential Code so that in the event where you have to put a test on, but you got to leave it overnight and temperatures are not going to be real amenable to allowing water to sit in a plastic pipe, we can use air. Anything you want to add on that, Rob?
No, I think that's how most jurisdictions have been doing it. I know that there was quite a bit of conversation about this during the session, but I mean, I think it's pretty standard of what was happening. So it's just good to have it into the amendments.
Yeah. And I will say it was interesting. I got a lot of pushback from the Piping Association, the Plastic Association, on how we had said in the IPC how dangerous plastic piping is. So I had to take that out of this one, but it's still in the IPC language. So, and then one of the issues that we were up against this year and we brought forward was the IRC was always meant to be a standalone code. But as we all know, the IRC does not include a lot of provisions, especially when it comes to electrical installations that just aren't covered in the IRC. So we added a list of things that we can go to the NEC for when it comes to IRC installations.
Yeah, with this, there was the actual original bill was going to just strictly only allow a residential home to be built out of the IRC. It doesn't work by doing that. I mean, solar is a great example that it's out of the NEC. Unless you're doing batteries, so the committee for the electrical came up with this list, and I think it's a good list that kind of says, why would I go from one code to the other? And these are some, maybe not every example, but these are a very good list of, I think, the majority of the examples. I think they did a great job putting this list together.
Yeah. yeah, we had the electrical advisory committee put this together. Ryan Jackson kind of headed that up, and thank you to them for coming up with this code change. Appreciate their work on it. Let's see. This was another thing that surprised me. In the NEC, we had deleted the provision, the current provision in the code that addresses bathtub and shower space receptacles. And we went back to the old version where it says you cannot have a receptacle installed within or directly above a bathtub or shower stall. Right now, the code says you can't have it within 3 feet of that space, which we found has been problematic. A lot of people are going to bidets or other things, and the toilet sits right next to the shower or the tub stall, and it was prohibited from being in that location. So we went back to just requiring it to be, it's prohibited in just the shower stall or the bathtub space.
Good change. I mean, I think it's what's mostly been in effect, and again, this is just another common sense change.
Yeah, and it was in the NEC, but for some reason it wasn't where it actually applies in the IRC, so we just moved it over from the NEC. Let's see. This is just some clarification on the old SEER rating versus the new SEER rating, and what we've done is we've provided a conversion factor table. It's not on this slide, but it will be in the state amendments. And so if you can look at that, if you have res checks that come in that the rates are using the new SEER values, you can figure out a way to convert those using this table that we'll have in the state amendments. Moving forward, we had some clarification of when makeup air is required. If you have a single family dwelling, or residential dwelling, where gas, liquid, and solid fuel burning appliances located within units, air barrier, or all direct vent, or use mechanical draft ventilation, makeup air is not required. It's pretty self-explanatory on that one.
This isn't very self-explanatory. I mean, especially with all the new high efficiency equipment, we're getting less needed, so it's a good one.
Yeah, I think that's only going to increase as we move towards federally mandated requirements.
I would agree.
Once again, more energy code modifications. We're going to kind of go through those or skip over those and let Brent handle that one. The definition of the word approved, once again, we're just trying to make sure that the definitions match as we go from code to code. And so that's what this one is. Both of these, the code official, these two definitions are just modified to match existing IBC language. And this was something that was brought to my attention. I think in the real world, your utility contractors are installing the lateral from the transformer over to the building, and then the electrician is taking it from the foundation up to the meter base. And this is a change that allows a underground electric utility conduit to be ran by an E100 and doesn't have to be ran by the electrical contractor, which should help us with affordable housing and really just keep it how it's being done right now.
And why did this come about, Tom? This
So
it's kind of interesting.
yeah, what happened is Doppel started citing some of the E100 licenses for running the piping from the utility transformer over to the house because they had an excavator on site. They were already there, so they would dig that trench, put in the conduit and bury it, and then the electrician would take it from the 90 up to the meter base. Well, they were, for some reason, Doppel started citing E100s for doing that work. So
yeah, I just thought this was one that would need a little bit of explanation because some people might not quite understand why this comes in, but I think it's a good move. Thanks for the explanation, Tom.
Yeah, that's great. So that concludes the kind of the code amendment bills. The one thing I did want to talk, and Rob and I were talking about this earlier, is if you go to ICC's website right now, we have ICC has taken all of our state amendments that we have and has put them together in the Utah Building Code, the Utah Plumbing Code, the Mechanical Code. So we now have on ICC's website, if you search by state specific, it will bring up all the building codes with the state amendments that were current as of January 1st of this year. And they're now working on getting these amendments put in those books, and those will be out shortly. But right now we have a Utah building code, residential code, plumbing code, mechanical, fuel gas code, all on the website with the Utah state amendments as incorporated in the code books, which is really exciting.
This is huge. I mean, being around this for a few years, the one thing that a lot of people don't even know about sometimes is our state amendments. So this is great because now it's just in the code book. This will hopefully take some of that confusion away, and I think it's going to be a good move going forward. So hopefully with these new codes, the amendments just become part of the everyday code for everybody. So I think that's good.
And I will say, I'm going to say it anyway. One thing we're looking at is, as we move forward with the building codes and ICC develops these, I think I'm going to try to find a way this next session to figure out how we can get digital premium access to all building departments using the state 1% fund, as well as access to read-only access to contractors, so that all of our contractors have unlimited access to these building codes with an app on their phone, or so that I think if we can get the code out to everybody, we can educate them and let them know that it's available for them, and we just get better product at the end of the day.
And in the end, this could be a big cost savings for departments in how you purchase your books and things like that. So if we can get this in next year's session, which hopefully we can, I believe this could end up being quite a cost savings for departments, plus the ability for everybody to have the codes with the amendments in it. So
yeah, so that's something we're working on. We'll see how it pans out. You know, the legislature sometimes we get things through and sometimes we don't, but we'll work on it. So moving forward, this bill is not really a building code bill, but it does address off-site modular construction, which is something I think we're starting to see a lot more of. SB 168 deals with affordable housing, but more specifically, it deals with, as far as we're concerned, modular construction. And so what this bill does is it creates a statewide modular program, and that will be ran through DFCM. What DFCM's role will be is we will accept applications from offsite modular construction facilities, as well as third-party inspection agencies and plan review agencies that will conduct and work for these modular construction companies. We will audit them. We will conduct review of the requirements. We'll stand up a program, a statewide program, so that when you receive plans for an offsite modular construction facility to be put into your jurisdiction, you can know that as long as it has a state decal on it and state approval, that it's been through the review process from a state-approved inspection firm, and it's been monitored and inspected on the site where it's being built, so that you have some level of assurance that it's built to the standard. Now, when we talk about modular, let's not mistake that for manufactured. Modular construction is required to be built to the IRC or the IBC. It's not a reduced standard. It's not, for the sake of a better word, it's not a lower standard building.
no, and I think this has happened in a few communities already, and I think this just now puts some guidelines instead of the community deciding exactly how they want to do it or trying to figure out how to do it. This puts some guidelines on it going forward. So I think it's a great move. This bill was worked on for months, and I think it's in a really good place. Hopefully going forward, I think it just puts some straight guidelines that'll help us out.
Yeah, and we did have a lot of conversations with the League of Cities and Towns on this bill. I worked a lot of hours on this bill. We worked with the League. We worked with Ivory Innovations, and we believe this is a path forward for some good affordable housing. But that being said, what it does for the jurisdiction is it is very clear that you assume as a jurisdiction no liability in aspects of the construction that you did not specifically look at. So I want to make sure that you're aware of that. So you'll still get a plan. It will still be site specific. So you'll review the engineering criteria that it was designed to, make sure the wind loads, the snow loads, all those things are correct. and that it was built under the right site-specific design criteria. But that's about where your plan review will end of that structure. You should do a plan review on all the site-specific, the footing, foundation. Those should all be designed by an engineer, and you should be reviewing all those. Site requirements from a city standpoint, those will all still be part of your review. And as far as inspections go, when the modular unit does show up, you will inspect the connections, any connections that need to be made on site, any connections to the footing or foundation that need to take place. That will all be part of your responsibility as the local jurisdiction having authority. And what we would recommend on a final inspection, we would recommend that you do a final inspection as though it were a structure that was built in your facility. And that way it provides us a level of auditing. If you find issues in these modular construction houses or buildings, you can let us know that, hey, we're seeing this problem, and we can address it with our agencies and with our firms. So I think overall it will be a great asset to help save you guys some time in the field and in plan review, as well as provide a level of assurance that it's being done and being monitored before it gets to your site.
Yeah, and it's good, especially with the plan review. It gives you the opportunity to look at it at least. I mean, a good example would be if it's one of these that are tight to a property line, may not be allowed to have, openings or something like that. You would be able to call that in your plan review before it's done. So I think it's a good moving forward bill. I think this may become really popular, I believe, in rural Utah areas like that. This is, I think, the future probably coming to.
Yeah.
So it's going to make it easier where contractors aren't as easy to get, and I think hopefully it helps out going forward. So
yeah, that's perfect. That's kind of the thought behind it. So with this bill, we did adopt ICC and NBI 1200 and 1205, which is the offsite construction kind of standards. So I think as we look forward through that, if you get modular construction in your jurisdiction, this is something that you want to be familiar with. It really clearly defines where your role as an on-site jurisdiction begins and ends, and where the state's role as the off-site modular inspection manager kind of begins and ends. And hopefully we can collaborate on this, work together to make sure that this program gets stood up properly. And if we have issues, we can identify them quickly, and we can make sure that modular units are to the same quality and level that we would expect from a stick-built home. I think that I have a lot of slides here, but I'm not sure that we haven't already covered a lot of what it's saying. So with that, that's SB 168. So thank you.
thank you.